Now, some of you are familiar with the Camelback Inn just down the road. And if you've ever been there or driven by it, they have this sign out front that says, "Where time stands still." And I always thought that was just kind of a cute little saying. I didn't think much of it until this weekend, when many of us got here earlier. Time literally stood still because the rest of the country changed their clocks, but we did not here. And for me personally, I got all screwed up on this, and Karen Coker from Microsoft won't let me live this down. But our phones did not necessarily update correctly, so many of us had our tea times incorrect. So if you want to hear the story from Karen, she'll tell you how I berated her on what time it actually was. It was kind of a humorous conversation. But let me riff on time for a second, because I think time has been interesting over the last couple of years. Over these last 2 years, we've experienced things that we've never experienced before. We've had to deal with sort of one thing after another that has really tested us as a society. It's tested us as organizations and as individuals. And to me, it's really accentuated the need to be agile. And I think as organizations, we have entered this new era of agile, where we've now recognized that we've got to make sure our workforces are set up to be agile, our workflows, our processes, our work structures are as agile as possible for the next unforeseen event, because it's pretty clear we're going to continue to see a lot of events that we never anticipated, planned for, or expected. And when it comes to agility, I've always loved this chart that we put together a little while ago around agile organizations. Now, most of you know we bifurcate our research by high-performing and low-performing companies. And when we explored agility for those companies, it's very clear that high-performing organizations, they look at change as normal, expected, manageable, or maybe more importantly, as an opportunity and part of their business model to be a disruptor. Low-performing organizations are much more likely to view change as a threat or wearing us down or overwhelming. And it's very clear that the companies that thrived over these last couple of years, they were companies on that top continuum, the ones that had a positive perception of change and a workforce that did not fear change overall. This is going to continue to be critically important going forward as organizations. For us at i4cp, it really showed to us that we had something that really helped a lot of you through these last couple of years, and that was the power of community. We have an unbelievable network of practitioners, the numbers in the tens of thousands from all over the world. And I love that many of you are asking questions of that network, answering questions in that network, and attending a number of our networking events. Here's a screenshot that we kind of see almost every day. We're having these kind of meetings. It must have been a very somber conversation, so I'm guessing from the expressions of folks here. But we over the last couple of years, we counted up. I don't know who counted this, but thank you for counting this. We had 459 meetings that were either our next practice series, or we've been doing this Getting Hybrid Work Right series lately. We've done a number of webinars, industry roundtables, forums, flash calls. Many of you, probably most of you, have participated in these meetings. You have also participated in the research studies that we've done. We've continued to conduct numerous studies that will help educate and illuminate what are some of the next practices out there for our audience. And we've also enabled countless peer connections. And many of you will call up your account manager or somebody in i4cp and ask, hey, I'm trying to do this. Do you know anybody else who has done it? And typically we have lots of companies that have gone down that path, and we facilitate those peer connections. And we've done all of this while people have been basically remote. Most of you attending have been remote. We were remote. But it's really the hard work of the i4cp staff that set these up and your cooperation in lending your expertise and insights. Now, I want to take this opportunity to just have all the i4cp people stand up briefly. So if we could have all the i4cp employees stand up, please. Now see that? I didn't even have to ask them to applaud. They just did it naturally. So those folks, if you have any questions here during this week, reach out to anybody from i4cp. We'll be glad to help. But I really appreciate all the effort that went in to making that community come alive over these last 2 years. I also want to formally thank our conference folks. So many of you have probably met Tamara Brown or Marianne Menta. So I want to thank Tamara and Marianne specifically. Let's have a little round of applause for them. And very specifically, the guy that makes this really all happen, and that's Eric Samdahl, way over in the corner. So thank you, Eric. It's not necessarily easy putting on a conference like this every year, but we, one of the benefits of coming back to the Fairmont has been knowing the staff and the team here at the Fairmont. And so it's also been fun to just see a number of people who we hadn't seen in 3 years. And I've had numerous staff here say, "Oh my God, we're so glad to have your group back. You have such a great group." And so it's just fun from that perspective to all get back together. Now, as I think about this world that we've been living in, particularly being forced to be remote and not be in offices, I've been a little dismayed at the comments of some CEOs around their acceptance of this new reality that I think we're in. And I think work has forever been changed based on the pandemic. But there's been some famous quotes by a number of people. So, and you've probably read some of these. Jamie Dimon, no fan of remote work, clearly. He feels that working from home doesn't work for those who want to hustle. I'm not sure I agree with. Another CEO, John Schlifsky of Northwestern Mutual, he's been very adamant that the culture of their organization really revolves around the campus at Northwestern Mutual, not a fan of remote work. And it's not just limited to financial service organizations. Reed Hastings at Netflix was very clear that he's not a fan of working remotely, wants people back in the office altogether. In fact, one of the biggest voices in all of this is David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs. You've probably read some quotes from him and stories over the last couple of weeks. But Fortune magazine just published a couple of days ago a headline that said, "Meet the CEO looking to end hybrid work for good." And Alan Murray, sitting right over here from Fortune, Alan's written about this over the last few days, actually, and just comparing and contrasting the viewpoints of somebody like David to the CEO of American Express. Now American Express has viewed remote and hybrid work. And so it's been disappointing, disconcerting really to read some of these comments because I think history is going to prove some of these quotes wrong. And I think we're already starting to see it with talent. And from a talent attraction perspective, the number one question people are asking is, what is your policies around flexible and remote work? Now, it's not all CEOs that feel this way. Good friend Dan Price, who's the CEO of Gravity Payments, he was a keynote speaker here a few years ago. He put this tweet out last week, which said, "Hey, if you want to find workers and increase your talent pool, go remote." Said some other nice things about remote work. And if you want to be a control freak for no good reason, force everyone back to the office. Dan is never short on opinions and expressing his opinions, but I love him for that. So I think there's, like a lot of you probably resonate with Dan's attitude towards this. And we've been exploring what is best, what's best for the organization, what's best for the individual. It's very clear that most organizations are going to have to move towards true flexibility going forward. In fact, a lot of hybrid situations, I was talking about this yesterday with a few groups, we call it structured hybrid, where you have 2 or 3 set days in the office and set times in the office. A lot of those hybrid situations were the outcome of a negotiation, almost a horse trade, if you will, between the CEO and the CHRO. And I've talked to many CHROs who have told me this, that, hey, look, the CEO wanted everybody back in 5 days a week, just like Solomon. The CHRO is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. And then we kind of meet in the middle, and have a compromise of what the policy is going to be. And honestly, I just find that ridiculous, because it's not based on research. It's not based on science. It's not based on the sentiment of the employees and what works best for the employees. It's based on individual opinions. And that's what I think we've been wrestling with in this return to office situation for a lot of organizations, is policies are being placed across a broad swath of the employee base based on individual opinions. Well, here's my opinion. Your office is not your culture. And I've seen many people relate their campus or their office situation to their culture overall. Now, I know a little bit about culture. This is what I did during the pandemic. This was my homework assignment, and leverage the great research that our research team had put together around culture change. And we created this book to be a blueprint based on the research and based on numerous case studies and exploring organizations like Microsoft, who you're going to hear from in a second, on what it takes to really positively change your culture. Now, the book came out almost exactly a year ago. It's on its 5th printing since it came out, which I'm told is pretty good. And I think the reason why it's been popular is because a lot of organizations are worried about their culture. In fact, I've been collecting headlines since the pandemic, and there's been a lot of rhetoric around what has happened to your culture during the pandemic, what's it going to be like post-pandemic. And I've said to numerous companies, if you're wondering if your culture changed during the pandemic, you should stop wondering. It absolutely did. But the question is going to be, do you want to be proactive around changing your culture for the future, or passive and reactive and let those changes happen based on this new way of working going forward? I've been thrilled that a number of companies, Fortune 500 companies, are now using culture renovation to help shape their culture for the future and using it as a blueprint. But it's not just companies. Last week, I had the privilege of being in Annapolis at the U.S. Naval Academy, because we found out recently the U.S. Navy is using culture renovation to change the culture of the Navy. And they brought me in to speak to the top 400 executives at the U.S. Navy around what you all are doing in the corporate world. Because the Navy is led by a very progressive guy, the Chief Naval Officer, Harvard MBA, who has been gleaning insights from the corporate world for quite some time that he feels he can apply to the Navy that will last long after he's out of his role as Chief Naval Officer. And I loved it. I loved the progressive thinking. And I love the fact that they're trying to utilize some next practices from organizations to help what we're all paying for, the US Navy, and an organization that has a very, very strong culture to begin with. But the Navy, like a lot of you, recognizes that this is going to be very critical to get right as we deal with the Great Resignation, a term that I absolutely hate, this war for talent going forward. And I want to tell you, the war for talent is over, in case you didn't know, and the talent won. Very, very clear, the talent won. We asked all of you recently, what's been your voluntary attrition in the past 12 months? 3/4 of you said it has increased. Not a shock. I'm actually surprised it's only 3/4. And as we asked you, okay, who's leaving your organization? There were some pretty interesting data points that came out as we looked at it from different lenses. So as we looked by generation, 41% cited Gen Z, so those workers aged 18 to 24, had the highest attrition rate in their organizations. 43% said that women had the highest attrition rate. And that's been widely documented. Particularly working mothers have had a tough time over the last couple of years. In a lot of ways, they're a hidden talent pool that I think corporations can tap into. There's a lot of talent pools out there that we're kind of overlooking in this war for talent. 68% said that frontline workers had the highest attrition rate. And 42% said that employees who were new in their career, somewhere less than 3 years tenure, had the highest attrition rate. Now, as we asked organizations, what are your thoughts around flexibility? It was very clear that high-performing organizations, way more than low-performing organizations, were providing flexible options on a number of different levels, from where somebody works, the number of days that a worker is given, time of day that work is done. We're going to see more and more of this going forward. High-performing organizations don't necessarily care about where or when the work is being performed. They care about the work itself. And you can find some of these stats in recent studies that we've created and our expert research team has put together. So flexibility or flight was a study that we just came out with recently. And we partnered with Fortune magazine on this next study, the Talent Imperative, that's going to come out shortly. And Alan and I will talk a little bit about it. But some of those stats are in there, and many more obviously are in there as well, if you're interested in trying to take back some research to your team. Now, when I talk to companies about why do you want people back on site or in the office, outside of a whole cadre of employees who are required to be there, essential workers or a variety of workers that are required to be on site, the number one answer that we typically get is, well, it improves innovation. It improves collaboration. That's why we want people back on site. And that's sort of folklore, because there's really not a lot of evidence that supports that. There's a great article in the New York Times a while ago, do chance meetings at the office boost innovation? Well, there's no evidence of that. Maybe they do in some cases, but there's no evidence to support that that's the case. In fact, they found evidence to the contrary, frankly, that innovation oftentimes is not sitting in a conference room someplace. It's really individuals putting disparate things together to create new products, new services, new ideas, et cetera. And as I thought about this, an old quote came to mind, one that's been used many times by Alvin Toffler, that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And this came to mind because I think more than any other time in our lifetimes, we're at a point where we've got to relearn a lot of things and unlearn a lot of things before we relearn. We've had to do this throughout history. So I'll give you a quick example of that. Up until a couple hundred years ago, does anybody know what the most common surgical technique was? I know you know the answer, Rob. Don't yell it out. It was bloodletting, right? When somebody was sick, we bled them. That was up until the early 1800s. This is the way we dealt with people who were ill. And for 2,000 years, we dealt with this. And if you think about that now, it just seems barbaric, right? It seems ridiculous that that's what we thought would help cure somebody who was ill. This is the way George Washington died, was through bloodletting. And I got thinking about that because I wondered, okay, if we fast forward 200 years from now, what are people going to be saying about this time period and our viewpoints right around now? And I think this cartoon, which I kind of doctored up, captures this. Now, this is the way I picture future people to look. They're all going to be bald and sexless. Maybe it'll end discrimination. That well, if they all look like it now, we'll still figure out ways to discriminate against people, I'm sure. But this is, as I think about the future, I wonder what are they going to be thinking about at this point in time, as we had all these different arguments. And so discussions that I expect to gain momentum between now and the next time we all get together is I think we're going to have a significant shift away from this, are you in the office or out of the office? And we're going to get back to focusing on goals and OKRs and really caring about the outcome, not if you're in an office or not. And it seems silly to even say this right now. i4cp, you may not know, has a long history. We were founded decades ago. We used to be called the Human Resource Institute. And one of our founders is George Ordiorn. And he was a mentor of my co-founder, Jay Jamrog. And if you haven't met Jay, please meet Jay. He will regale you with story after story. Some of them are even true. And one of the stories he'll tell you is about George. And George made, he made his mark talking about MBOs, managed by objectives. And here we are decades later, still talking about this. And I really do think that the conversation is going to shift this way. I think we'll also be talking a bit more about equity, because by nature, if we're doing true flexibility with workers and pushing autonomy down, and that's really what flexibility is all about, is giving autonomy to managers and to workers, it's going to be inequitable. It won't be the same for everybody. And so we're going to have, I think, a conflict in talking about what's equitable, but what's right and what works for the individual in the organization. I think we'll also see some more office closures. I asked this yesterday of one group I was speaking to here, and I said, how many of you closed offices over the last couple of years? And I was surprised that many had. And I think it's been a little quiet around that in the press, but I think we'll see some reduction in office for a lot of companies, not all, and a ramp up in shared offices going forward, particularly in areas where organizations don't have a lot of employees coming into an office, but a few do want some kind of office going forward. I think we'll also see a lot more discussion around location bias. We talk a lot about bias overall in our research team, but this will start to crop up as a real issue, where people who are in front of you will get an unfair amount of the promotions or the salary adjustments going forward. And this will be something that we'll probably be measuring more so of our managers than we ever even thought about in the past. All of this is part of what is our little underlying theme to this conference, the next frontier. And that's what our gala is going to be about tonight out at Copper Canyon. We're going to be exploring over the next few days the next frontier that we find ourselves in work. And just like Lewis and Clark explored the frontier years ago, we're hoping that together we can discover what work is going to be like going forward.